Join us for this week's One Man's Dreamboat segment with Florida Sportsman Boating editor George Labonte as we feature anglers who have already launched their dream. Florida Sportsman began these features 30 years ago, and the dreams just keep getting better.
This week we're heading down to Isla Mirada, Florida to visit with Gary Skrobeck and his father, Captain Skip Paxton. Skip and Gary took a 1972 Willy Roberts flats boat and took an old boat and restored it to better than original condition. Gary's father, Skip, was actually in the Florida Keys during this era and had close ties with Willy Roberts.
At that time, when I first started out, Willy Roberts boats were the original backcountry flats boats here to really take off and be a working machine. And Willy's boats were, in those days, used by all the top guys. It was the boat to go to. And from that, I just took off with my Willy. And I've had one ever since. I took Gary into the shop one day. I was going in to see Willy for something for my boat. And he tagged along with me, and we went in, and Willy looked at him and says, "You're Skip's son?" And he says, "Yep." And he says, "Well, do you have your own Willy boat yet?" And he says, "Nope." And Willy says, "Well, you just wait a minute." And he went to his bandsaw and cut out a perfect image of a Willy Roberts boat on his bandsaw right there and handed it to him.
Yep, still have it to this day.
Now, when you're driving down the road in the Florida Keys, you're surrounded by water and there's boats on both sides. Gary had been admiring this boat from the distance for a long time, and when the opportunity to get possession of it came along, he took advantage of it.
That boat always used to sit right there at the end of the dock at Tavernier Creek. So if you were heading south over the bridge and you look off to the right, that boat always sat right there at the end of the dock. And you can still, to this day, see that thing sitting there. And never in a million years at the time, could have imagined the events that would have transpired, the restoring that thing and now, owning it.
Now that Gary finally had his own Willy boat, it was time to get to work. Now, growing up around these boats, he had seen them in their pristine condition, and when it came down to doing this boat over, he wasn't going to settle for anything less.
When we got the boat, it was rigged and almost operational, but I mean, it had been neglected for years and years, and just needed a complete hull-up restoration. And it was one of those things, the more you got into it, the more issues you'd discover, and next thing you knew, it was a completely gutted, down to the stringers and ribs, bare hull, essentially. But yeah, the boat was moved up to West Palm area, and that was where the majority of the fiberglass work was done when I was living up there at the time. Primarily, the high-density blue water Coosa was used throughout. All the bulkheads and everything else, all half-inch material. The deck was half-inch. And I think we laid it up with 10-ounce cloth and tried to put, the best material we could put into it.
The boat was now structurally better than ever, and it was time to paint. Gary completed a beautiful all-grip paint job that really transformed the look of the boat.
From my understanding, that Willy Roberts was not really a fan of the finish aspect of it. Painting, not so much his forte. The building, top-notch. But so, it might be safe to say that finish is a little nicer than what may have been originally on there.
Oh yeah. Jack Roberts, the original owner of the boat, was a big man. He's like 6'5" and 240. All he ever had for power was a 70 horsepower Johnson. It was amazing how fast that boat would travel. And now we've powered it with a 90, and she'll run 40 to 45 miles an hour with that 90, and that's getting it down the road, for a 19-foot 6-inch boat.
It definitely wasn't a start to finish. It took us several years to redo this boat. It wasn't a quick fix whatsoever. As long as you have a vision of what you want it to look like, you, at the end of the day, are ultimately the one that is the one that puts any limitations on yourself as far as what you're able to achieve. It's interesting, you look at the lines of that old boat, there's no doubt about that guy Willy was way ahead of his time as far as his designs and just his vision to incorporate the best qualities of a skiff. You know, it's got room in it, which, and you see in these boats nowadays, there's essentially no room. It's all forward casting area, and it's nice to be able to have, you know, 2 or 3 people in that boat and have the ability to move around and everyone's not on top of one another. It's, for down here, it's an excellent charter boat. Not only is there room available in it, and you know, like today with these west winds that we're having, you know, it handles a rough sea incredibly well for a skiff.
Willy's boats were always shallow water, real shallow draft. You could get into places where you couldn't with other skiffs.
What's unique about that boat as well is there's essentially 0 hull slap. It's not something that you know, a lot of people would be aware of. And it's these little intricacies, you know, that this boat has that, you know, I think can be lost in a lot of the newer skiffs now.
What Gary ended up with was a piece of Florida Keys history that he was able to keep alive, and in the process of doing so, was able to continue the legacy handed down to him from his father.
After spending $3,000 on the hull and $10,200 on repairs and custom modifications, the cost of Gary's Dreamboat comes to a total of approximately $13,200.